Is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak and Craig Smoak.
All right, here we go. 4 o'clock hour has begun. Craig Smoak's off the radar in about 40 minutes or so. In the 5 o'clock hour, we're going to check in with the Open Championship at St. Andrews in Scotland. Of course, they don't play and start till Thursday, but we'll have Rob Bolton on to discuss who the picks are, and we'll have our draft that we do as well. We're now joined by Michael Coe. He is he's a columnist, writer, covers a lot of the ACC in the Carolina area with WCHL Chapel, so ESPN. Did anyone else did that get much play in your area?
Yeah, it's actually one of the trending stories on our site. And yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Thanks a lot.
So what was the reaction? Was that something, because we were trying to say, is that because he knows something? Because otherwise I don't think he would throw it out there. And why would ESPN want to make it a more friendly contract in the first place?
Right, yeah. I think that's the big question that I had coming away from that is ESPN has a very ESPN favorable contract with the ACC right now. So I think it would take a concerted effort from all of the ACC schools, not just North Carolina, to maybe get that changed, maybe even taking them to court, which has been a possibility that I've seen floating around. But the fact that Guskowitz, the UNC chancellor, would say that he's optimistic leads me to believe that those conversations are being had right now.
Michael, what has been the reaction in Chapel Hill? North Carolina being one of those schools that's sort of in a unique position. I mean, obviously they're tied down to the ACC for the time being, but there's plenty of discussion, hence having you on about how that could change. There's thoughts that if, let's just say the grant of rights disappeared, North Carolina would be one of those darlings that could be courted by the SEC or the Big Ten. As all this is just kind of swirling, what's the thoughts right now for Tar Heels fans in Chapel Hill?
Yeah, a lot of Tar Heel fans that I have been seeing, I originally thought that a lot of them would be, sentimental about the ACC, given that UNC is one of the charter members. They're an ACC lifer pretty much. But a lot of the reaction that I've been seeing is, look, it's survival of the fittest. UNC has to do what's best for UNC, whether that's the Big Ten or the SEC or renegotiating the contract with ESPN to stay in the ACC. They've got to look out for themselves. So I was a little surprised by that, but it's look, UNC is a very popular brand around the country, especially with the tie-ins with Jordan. So they're going to be able to choose where they want to go. It's just a matter of when, in my opinion. The
grant of rights seems to be an albatross or just a big anchor around their neck. Is there anything positive about it?
Well, it depends on who you're asking, right? I think the positive thing about it is that the ACC did get its own network. Of course, this was well behind the launches of the Big Ten Network and the SEC Network, but it was put into place, I believe, to really give the ACC Network some staying power. And the network has been around since 2019, on the air since 2019. So I think it's good for that perspective, just getting more media out there, but not really a school-friendly deal.
What are your thoughts on just the idea that's been either reported or put out there, however you want to phrase it, but the Pac-12 alliance? We know how the initial alliance went. Some can argue that it served its purpose because there's not an expanded playoff right now, and they got that done, and so it worked in the long run. But as we've seen, there's other things going on. What are kind of the thoughts on the alliance part one and potentially, doing something with the Pac and keeping them afloat?
Right. Well, I think the original alliance, it was a lot of, we looked each other in the eye and we made a gentleman's agreement. We had a handshake, but there was nothing really in writing to really lock any of that down. And now we have seen why. It's USC and UCLA were moving on to greener pastures. So with this new alliance, quote unquote, with the ACC and what remains of the Pac-12, I'm not convinced of its staying power unless there is something actually done in writing, because we saw how weak the first alliance was.
It's interesting because there is that thought that two conferences will gobble up everybody. Can you actually see that, Michael, happening, that there will just be two conferences? Or do you still feel like there will be 4 or 5 Power Fives, and then just the other two get more people in the college football championship playoff?
Right. Well, I really do think that we're heading more and more toward the two superpowers option. I think with the eyes that are on college football and how much money the big-time college football programs rake in, and money drives everything in college athletics these days. That's just how it is. And it's survival of the fittest out there. And if you're not in one of those two conferences, you are not getting the amounts of money that the LSUs, the Alabamas, the Michigans, the Ohio States are getting. And that's going to mean you're not getting as good practice facilities, you're not drawing as many recruits, and you're not winning as many games. That's just how it is. So I really do think that if we continue on this course that we are on, it's going to be those two super conferences, quote unquote.
Which would North Carolina want to be a part of if they had their choice?
I think I'm a UNC alum. I've spent a lot of time in Chapel Hill. I think probably the Big Ten, just because UNC and Michigan they kind of view each other as sister schools, sort of. They're in that public Ivy conversation. They play each other a lot in men's basketball. They're playing each other again this December. So I think the Big Ten is where UNC would probably want to lean.
And Mac Brown, we know him. We've had him on this show. He's someone we've known a long, long time. He's a great recruiter. They had kind of a letdown season last year. Was that just kind of expectations were too much for them?
I think it was probably that probably had something to do with it. They just didn't play well in the games that they needed to play well. The first game at Virginia Tech, Sam Howell throws 3 interceptions. At Georgia Tech, they keep turning the ball over. They fumble the ball, I think, 3 or 4 times. Then in the last 2 games of the season, the bowl game against South Carolina and the regular season finale against NC State, just disastrous. When the lights shone brightest, they completely crumbled. Hopefully that isn't the case this coming year. Maybe it won't be, because there won't be as many eyes on them. They're not even close to the conversation of preseason top 25. They're going to have a brand new starting quarterback. So they may come out and play a little looser. Who knows?
How's the NIL been working for them when it comes to football? We know basketball, obviously, coming off the great run, beat Baylor in that second-round game that was incredible up in Fort Worth. But how have they done when it comes to NIL in either sport, but especially in football?
Yeah, I think in football, Sam Howell actually took a real advantage of the NIL. He inked a deal with Bojangles, which is a really popular restaurant here in North Carolina. He was in some commercials, I think, for an air conditioning company with a bunch of his offensive line teammates. And from what I read and from what I heard from Mac Brown, he was very generous with his NIL deal, saying, hey, I'm only going to do it if you give a bunch of money to my teammates as well, to my offensive linemen, to the other skill positions, things like that. UNC has actually been really on the forefront of the NIL game. I just talked to a person in the athletic department a week ago, and he told me that they were the first school in the country to partner with a group called Brandar, which helps athletes capitalize on NIL while using UNC marks and logos. So it's been a really good thing for a lot of Tar Heel athletes, not just in football, like you said, but also in men's basketball, but also in some of the Olympic sports like field hockey, lacrosse. They've really been taking advantage of it.
Have you heard at all, Michael, that Mac Brown could be a great college football commissioner if they ever had one?
I have not heard that. I would next time I see him, I'll tell him you said that. I wonder what he's going to say. But I hadn't heard that. But it does make sense. He is good with the media, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And tell him Smokey said it, and then of course he might just laugh. But again, he's a friend of the show, and I just thought that would be interesting if he could be that person, or maybe the next president or executive director of the American Football Coaches Association might be something else as well. Craig, anything for Michael? Michael, thanks for your time. I'm glad that I got the story. Good luck with the ACC. We cover the Big 12. We cover throughout the country, but it's great to hopefully things work out and everything kind of settles down here.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Michael Coe, again, a card of WCHL and a reporter and the story involving the UNC chancellor, Guskowitz, and his comments to a few people that Michael had in his story.
Yeah.